It's always a great honor to have us when we have time to sit down with them because this is a big issue. And I'm talking about none other our good friend, Professor Michael Busler. He's the public policy analysis and professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. He does have a website, muckrack.com/Michael Busler. And there's a picture of that landing page. So, Professor, good to see you, friend. How are you, bud?
Always good to see you, Perry. Doing very well. Thank you.
You and I have had some great discussions, and I do honor them highly. It's just an honor to have you in all your wisdom and experience. And today I want to zero in on the national debt. And I guess there's two ways to look at this. Number one, the Professor Busler way. And the other one is President Trump's way. Those would be the two differences. And I guess my question to you is this. Number one, how serious is this debt?
Okay, so first of all, just a little bit of background. How did we get to where we are? So right now, the public debt is $37 trillion. $37 trillion. Now, first point, how did we get here? In 1962, economists convinced the Kennedy administration you don't have to balance the budget. That the government is always can always sell bonds, they can always raise taxes. It's okay to run a deficit, especially if it's going to stimulate the economy. So politicians went along with that. And for 59 of the next 63 years, we ran a deficit in the budget. Now, the problem is you run a deficit. How do you finance it? You sell 10 or 20-year bonds. When the bonds come due, we're still running a deficit, so we can't pay them back. So what do? They sell new bonds to pay back the old bonds and roll over the debt. That's why the debt keeps growing annually. Okay, so how big of a problem is it? So most economists will tell you if the public debt is less than 1 year's GDP, it's not a problem. It can be handled. Public debt is now $37 trillion. GDP will be about $29 trillion. So we're way above GDP. Economists will say that's a problem. So next question is, what exactly is the problem? Well, there are two problems. One, with the federal government pulling $37 trillion out of capital markets, it creates a capital shortage. So when business goes to expand and to raise capital, there's not enough available, and what is there is relatively expensive. And as a result of that, that tends to slow economic growth. So the first problem, what we call the crowding out effect, large debt crowds business out of financial markets. The second problem is, although we roll over the debt and really have no mechanism in place to ever pay it back, we do have to pay the interest every year. So last year, the interest was $880 billion. It'll be more than that this year, and it'll grow because as we refinance those bonds taken out 10, 20 years ago at 2%, we now have to pay 4% because that's the current interest rate. And as a result, the interest expense will continue to grow. So it'll soon reach $1 trillion a year in interest expense, and that's $1 trillion that the government can't use for more productive reasons, or it's $1 trillion that could have been given back to the taxpayers to pay less taxes. So the problems are it crowds business out of the market, and the interest expense is getting to be a very heavy burden.
Okay. If you add the interest on the debt, roughly $880 billion.
880 billion.
Yeah, 880 billion. To mandates in the budget, doesn't leave much discretionary dollars left.
So what you're saying is, well, if the public debt is so large, the first thing we want to do is stop adding to it. Like we say, when you're stuck in a deep hole like that, the first thing to do is to stop digging. So what we have to do initially is to balance the budget. Now, why can't we do that? Why is that so difficult? The Trump administration said, we're not raising tax rates on any American. We're not raising tax rates on any American. We will increase revenue by growing the economy and therefore creating more taxable income and therefore more tax revenue. And we have some other revenue streams we're looking at, mostly from tariffs. But that won't be enough to balance the budget. The reason we have such large deficits today is that government spending is exploding. In 2019, the federal government spent $4.5 trillion. This year, 6 years later, they'll spend $7.3 trillion. So we've had an explosion in government spending. So how do we reduce the deficit? Tax revenue goes up virtually every year and will continue to be higher this year than it was last year. But we have to reduce government spending that's exploded. Why is that so hard? Every politician will tell you, well, I'm in favor of cutting government spending. It's way out of control. We have to cut it. But then when suggestions are made where to cut it, every politician says, well, wait a minute, cut government spending, but don't cut it in an area where it affects me or my constituents. And it's very difficult to get any spending cuts passed. As a quick example, remember Elon Musk and Doge found hundreds of billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. So they said, let's cut this out. Even with a Republican president and a Republican Congress, both houses of Congress, all they could cut was $9 billion out. So cutting government spending is extremely difficult because once you cut somewhere that affects a politician's constituents, they're not going to vote for it and he can't get a majority. A quick example, they looked at Medicaid. 70 million Americans, 70 million, more than 20% of the population collect Medicaid. So they looked at it and they said, you know, there's about 10 million here who are not eligible to collect or who are collecting but are able-bodied and should be working and paying for their own. So what we'd like to do is cut Medicaid. Now, they couldn't cut it, but they cut some of the proposed increases. But even with that, even as obvious waste, fraud, and abuse, some politicians said, you can't cut this. All the poor people aren't going to have health insurance. This is horrible. We're not going to let you cut it. That's an example of every time they try to cut government spending, some politician says, look, this is going to negatively impact my constituents. I'm not going to let you do it. I'm not going to vote for it. And I'm going to tell all my fellow Congress people not to vote for it either. So cutting spending, which must be done as soon as possible, turns out politically to be very difficult. And we're going to have a tough time getting this deficit down before we even attempt to look at the public debt. We have to get this budget balanced. And because cutting spending is so hard, that's going to be very difficult.
Excellent explanation. A couple quick questions before I take a break. We're heading towards that wall again coming up in a couple of weeks in September.
Yep.
And everybody is thinking, well, here we go again with continuing resolutions. What's your take?
Unfortunately, that's the only thing that they can pass. What they should do is pass a budget for the fiscal year. The fiscal year 2026 starts October 1st. They should pass a budget in September for that fiscal year, which they won't be able to do for political reasons because you can't cut government spending. So all they'll do is say, look, we can't shut the government down, so let's pass a continuing resolution, kick the can down the road for another 6 months, and we'll worry about it then. They've been kicking the can down the road for 40 years. We're at the end of the road. So I think they should have a budget. Do I think they'll get one? No. I think they're going to pass another continuing resolution.
Is shutting the government down really a bad thing?
You know, it's a lot of inconvenience, but all of the essential payments are made. Social Security, Medicare, the armed forces, they're all made. The thing is, you won't be able to visit national parks. You probably won't be able to get your passport renewed. So there'll be a lot of inconveniences. I don't know if you recall, in 2011, we shut the government down for 3 weeks. Afterwards, people said, well, you know, that wasn't so bad. We didn't really miss a whole lot of things. So if you have to shut it down, they may have to. Maybe they'll do it. Politically, they always blame the Republican Party for this, but politically, it turns out to be not a good thing to do.
Okay. Let me take a quick break. Check out his website, muckrack.com/Michael Busler. And there's a picture of the landing page. A lot of good information there. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Always an honor to have with us Professor Michael Busler, Public Policy Analysis and Professor of Finance there at Stockton University. His website is muckrack.com/Michael Busler. We're talking about the $37 trillion national debt and its interest on it alone and balancing the budget. What do we do? And the bottom line is we have to cut spending. That is always a political, crazy thing to accomplish one way or the other. So the president's approach to this is let's just stimulate the economy so great that we can pay it down. Now, I realize a lot of these things that he's attracting to come to the United States are all great and they represent trillions of dollars, but we won't see it in action for several years down the road. But what do you think of that basic philosophy?
So since there's no real good solution to reducing government spending, you have to find one that is the best that you can without causing damage to the economy. President Trump says, I think that my policies of keeping tax rates low, reducing regulations, encouraging business to grow and expand should result in the economy expanding significantly. He'll say, back in 1982, President Reagan put forth some supply side tax cuts similar to what Trump has done. And he's also made it very easy for business to expand, similar to what Trump has done. And we went from, in 1981, the economy was in recession. The tax cut was passed in 1982. In 1984, the economy grew at a 7.4% annual growth rate. I don't know if Trump's policies will hit that. They may. If he comes anywhere close to that, that will raise significant amounts of revenue. Couple that with the revenue he's getting from the tariffs and his idea to try to hold the line as best you can with government spending may result in a balanced budget maybe 3-4 years down the road. So in theory, it could work. Reagan stimulated the economy, tax revenue went up. But when tax revenue went up, members of Congress said, look, we have more money to spend. So they actually spent more money and the deficit never went away. So in theory, what President Trump's trying to do makes sense. We'll have to see if it works.
Okay, so if you get a balanced budget and you create a surplus, if you don't earmark that surplus to go to pay down the debt, the government finds a way to spend it.
Usually. So the last time we had a surplus in the budget was 1997, 98, 99, and 2000. They were the only 4 years in the last 63 we didn't have a deficit. We had a surplus in the budget, and they did use the surplus to pay down the public debt. Somehow, they're going to have to guarantee, I'm not sure how they do it, but somehow the government will have to say, look, whatever money we bring in that is in excess of our spending this year, and we do have a surplus, it has to be used to pay down the public debt. I think at this point, if we can just stop the public debt from getting any bigger, that's a huge first step. As the economy grows, and if we can hold that public debt constant, even if we don't pay it off, but as the economy grows and generates more revenue, it will be easier to carry this debt. So ideally, we do want to get the budget balanced. We'd like to run a surplus, and we should use the surplus to pay down some of the public debt, and we hope that's what happens.
So it would appear that what DOGE proved was there was a lot of fraud and misspending and just craziness with dollars. It would seem to me that we would want to continue that investigation, expose that, and stop it. I mean, that alone would improve cash flow, right?
Yeah. So they found that USAID, the international money that's used to help less than developed countries and people in poverty, they found so much waste in there that they had to close down the whole agency and then try to start up again with what is actually needed. So it becomes very, very difficult to even shut those down because all the backlash that you got from members of the opposing party said, look, you're cutting spending, it's going to hurt people. But as we said, we've got to get this spending down and we've got to look for ways to do it. Doge, even though some of the players aren't there, Doge is still there and they're still looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're finding it. But to cut it out becomes difficult, even if it's ridiculous. They had $20 million to build Sesame Place in Iraq. They had money to do studies on ridiculous things. Those things should be eliminated. But when you start to do that, someone says, well, the relations that the U.S. has with other countries will be damaged if we don't give them money. The research that we do will be damaged if you don't fund all these research studies. So even though Doge will find waste, fraud, and abuse, actually implementing action that reduces it or eliminates it will be very difficult.
Okay, but at the end of the day, people who are the head of those agencies, can't they be held accountable for their budget?
Well, they can, but the thing is, Congress has allocated this money. And these the heads of the agencies say, look, we have this money. It's allocated for these purposes, research purposes. So we're going to spend it on these research things that we're doing. It has to start in Congress. Congress says we are not going to authorize spending in these areas, even though you think they're doing some good, and they probably are. We simply don't have the money. So we're going to have to start cutting back. Harry, the real elephant in the room here is the entitlement programs.
Right.
Between Social Security and Medicare, it's well over 50% of the budget. You add in the interest on the public debt, which has to be paid. Now we're up to almost 2/3 of the budget. Well, the interest we can't reduce unless we can get interest rates down and start to reduce the debt. What about the entitlement programs? They're taking up more than half of government spending. Can we do anything with that? Well, most people would say, look, you can't cut Social Security and Medicare. These people have been paying in their entire lives. They retire and they're depending on it. The system, though, those programs are on the verge of bankruptcy. Within the next decade, unless we do something, they'll probably be broke. So the question is, what do we do? There are no good solutions to this problem. So what we have to find is the solution that's the least bad. I think you don't want to cut anybody's benefits. I don't like raising taxes. That just tends to slow the economy down and hurt more than it helps. So if you can't raise taxes and you can't cut benefits, what are you going to do? The only thing to do, and this is not popular and it's not a good solution, but I think it's the least bad, is to raise the retirement age at least to 70 and probably up to 72. That'll have people working more, paying in, and fewer people collecting. And look, when Social Security was put in 1935, people retired at 65. The average life expectancy was 67. So it wasn't such bad. Today, you retire at 67. People are living to be in their 80s, 90s, some over 100. The system can't pay 35 years of retirement. It's only meant to pay a few. So the only thing to do, and admittedly, this is not a good solution, but the only thing to do is to raise the retirement age at least to 70 and probably up to 72. That'll save both programs.
Look, a little bit of a hypothetical, just a few seconds left here. Given what the president is attempting to do in addressing the problem. What would the professor add to that in order to really accomplish the goal?
You have to stick to those cuts in government spending. You suggest all these things, it gets to Congress, they debate it, they never get passed. Congress has got to grow a spine here and say, look, we just can't keep spending money that we don't have. We're placing a burden on our children and grandchildren. So what I would suggest to President Trump is do things that not only slow the rate of growth of government spending, actually reduce government spending. Whatever you have to do that, I think that's the most important thing that the president can do to try to get this deficit eliminated and the public debt reduced.
Professor, you're fascinating. Thank you, friend. It must frustrate you.
Hey, I've been on this debt thing for 20, 25 years, ever since really Reagan did his thing. The deficit never went away. And then every president just sort of kicked the can down the road. So it's been decades I've been frustrated by this.
Are we close to insolvency?
I don't know where exactly that point is. Again, we're above 1 year's GDP significantly, where economists say that could be a problem. At some point, the debt could be so heavy that investors will say, hey, this is a little risky, and we're not going to buy all that debt. Now, right now, it's the safest place to put your money. But if the debt burden gets to be too heavy, I don't know if investors will look at it like that. And then if we can't sell bonds, then we have a even worse problem.
Okay. Muckrack.com/Michael Busler is the website to go to stay connected. Thank you, Professor. We value your time greatly. Take care, friend.
Thanks for having me, Perry. Look forward to doing it again.
Okay.